We're returning to the original concepts that the internet could have been used for. There was a glimmer of infinite potential and true freedom. The irony is that the web became more centralized. So we have huge power with a few centralized suppliers. The full circle is to have the full power on anyone's device of the original internet, and then enable everyone to have the freedom to use it as they wish. That's what we're building.
Like many of us, I fell down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. I fell in 2012, and I'm still falling, as you do. And for me, the idea of financial freedom, it's so powerful. It resonates with many of us. The issues sort of started at about the SegWit wars. So originally, I was running Bitcoin with the -gen on the command line. What that means is that I was running it on my computer and I was mining with everybody. And there was a moment there, maybe for about a year, where every single person on the Bitcoin network ran the same software in the same way. We were one, we were a unit. And there wasn't any hierarchy. There wasn't any duality of users. There wasn't some people who did something and some people who did something else. And I guess for me, it started to slip when I noticed that I was no longer able to run a mining node, that I'd been kicked off the network by the ASICs, et cetera, et cetera. And the truth is that I'm not in this game to replace one set of rulers for another. I'm here because I want to be an equal on the network. I'm here because I want to be as much a part of the network as everybody else. And I find that this is, sorely lacking in all of the crypto that I see at the moment. Frankly, I'm just seeing again the idea that there's those people who run the network, and then there's those of us who use the network. And the problem with that is that as soon as you get into that situation, those who run the network become more and more powerful, and they also become a smaller and smaller group. And this is a problem. The reason this is a problem is simple, because what is the one single true value proposition of a blockchain? Okay, because it's not transactions per second.
Decentralization has to be.
And it's not convenience, because your contactless payment with Visa is very convenient. There's only one thing that the blockchain actually does, and that is anti-censorship. And the only way that we know to do anti-censorship is decentralization. That's the only way it works, because as soon as you centralize, that's the attack vector. That's how all these things go. And when you look at the current scene, everything is centralizing. Centralization is incredibly efficient. It is incredibly pernicious. If there is a crack where centralization can spread, it will spread. And so when you look at the mining scene, for instance, proof of stake, forget about it. If you want to know where proof of stake ends up, you look at Scheme. Remember Scheme and Binance, and they just got, all the coins are on the exchanges, they can do whatever they want. And they showed this very clearly, very nice, DPoS, blah, blah, blah. But even power mining, mining is an industry, just like every other industry. We already have miners. We have real miners, mine gold and silver, et cetera, et cetera. And just like every single other industry, it is susceptible to the economies of scale. The bigger you are, the cheaper stuff gets, the more efficient you can do this, the bigger you get, and it just escalates. And so if you want to stop that, if you don't want to end up the way that all the other mining scenes are going to end up, which is one miner, that's the end game for all of these, for all of this clever stuff that's going on. If we look objectively at the world, what has happened? Well, there's 3 miners that currently own all the gold mines, all the silver, like Rio Tinto, blah, blah, blah. They definitely could 51% attack the physical mining. And proof of work mining is the same. There's only one way that proof of work mining goes, and we see that objectively in the current landscape. There's going to be 2 or 3 miners that own everything. And that means that if I'm the Chinese government or some powerful entity in the future, and I want to attack, the censorship resistance of your chain, I basically have to attack 3 people. It's an afternoon's work. And so how do we get around it? How do I stop this from happening? And this was the problem that, I wanted to fix with Minima. This is what I was thinking. It's like, how can I go back to the way it was when we were all equal? And so the first thing you realize is that every single person on the network has to run the same software in the same way forever. I can't be relying on anybody to do anything that I'm not prepared to do. I can't outsource anything to anybody. They need to be an equal member of the network as much as I need to be an equal member of the network. And when you come up with this, some obvious things fall out. So for instance, it can't be running on a computer because frankly, nobody has a computer. That was the old paradigm. Nobody's got, I'm a nerd, I've got servers running, that's fine. Nobody else has. The only thing that everybody has, the only thing that the whole planet can actually use to run this blockchain is your mobile phone. And interestingly, mobile phones nowadays are so powerful. When you've got your Samsung phone, it's got your DeX, and you've got your whole desktop, and you're logging in, it's more powerful than my laptop from 5 years ago.
Right.
My current phone. Very, very powerful. You come to the conclusion that it's got to run on your phone. And you're thinking, right, okay, so I've got to squash a blockchain on the phone. How am I going to do that? Bitcoin's got a 500 gigabyte database. Ethereum's got a 4 terabyte database. It's like, I can't fit this on my phone. So what are we going to do? Well, The truth is that we've had a good 10 years of blockchain development. In hindsight, as they say, it's 2020. I can see, the battlefield of the things that worked and the things that didn't work, et cetera, et cetera. So lots of very nice technologies have been created in that time. One of those technologies is called an MMR database that Peter Todd, great man, invented. And what this gives us is called a proof database. So instead of everybody storing everything, which is frankly, pointless, because you can't spend my coins and I can't spend your coins. So why do I have to look after your coins and why do you have to look after my coins? Why don't we come up with a data structure where you can keep track of your coins using it's a hash tree, basically, where you keep the nodes at the end, and we all look after the root, the kernel. And then when you want to make a transaction, you include a proof with that transaction, which shows the validity of those coins. Now this is like, hey, does that work? And it's like, yeah, it totally works. And what's really nice about it is that we don't lose any information. We have exactly the same amount of information as a 500 gigabyte, as a 40 terabyte database, but you only have to look after the bits that matter to you, and I only have to look after the bits that matter to me, and I can share a proof, as you can, when I actually want to access those points. And what this means is you can actually get a database down to 5 to 10 megabytes, and that has all of the information you need so that everybody can prove to everybody else what's in it. Very nice, lossless system. And you're like, wow, okay, cool. And now we've got an idea of how to put a database onto a mobile phone that fits in the right amount of space. And the next thing you need to do is say, okay, so what about this mining thing? What about the hashing? Proof of work is clearly the way to go if you want to have a valuable chain. A lot of people conflate usefulness and valuable. Proof of stake is not valuable. It can be useful. And if I was a business, I would use proof of stake. If I was a permission chain, I would use proof of stake. But if I actually want to be money, if I actually want to be a store of value, if I actually want to be intrinsically valuable, it has to be proof of work. But your phone, is not, you don't want to be competing your phone against assets. You don't want to be, that's not going to work. Your phone is a small little device. So what Minima does, which is also quite a novel solution to the problem, is that instead of you mining to find blocks, every Minima user mines their transaction. So you do a little bit of work. And then we use Clever Maths, which is an offshoot of the P2Pool mechanism. So P2Pool was a mining protocol that existed, still exists, a decentralized mining protocol. And so everybody does a little bit of work, and then we sum all of that together to make blocks. So what this means is that instead of the paradigm where you say, look, I want 20 really big miners doing loads and loads of work, I'm like, no, forget that. Why don't we have 1 billion little miners that all do a little bit of work? And what's better yet, what's even better than this, is that there's no centralization. So you are not rewarded fiscally. You are not paid for finding a block. You're not interested in finding a block. You are just mining your transaction. And your reward is the utility of the network. So there is no incentive for somebody to buy loads of assets and to mine and to grind and to, and to try to, because the truth is that the only people that can attack proof of work chains are those who are paid to protect them. It's a really sort of strange
collusion.
It's really sort of like, right, so we keep giving these people bigger and bigger guns, we keep paying them, to get more and more powerful. And now, now we are enthralled to them. Now they are the only ones who can attack us. So we're in this sort of weird relationship, where actually what we want is different. They want to make money, I want to do transactions, they are centralizing, we are not centralizing. So Minima removes this. There is no centralization of the mining. There is no reward financially for mining. You have to mine your transaction, or the network won't accept it.
And here I want to make a little short branch out a bit here, because I find this really interesting. There is no reward for the miner, right? And this is a point that you drive across in the white paper, that you, as a means to get completely decentralized and truly combat censorship, you're asking more of users than you normally would with your regular proof of work blockchain. So what is apart from the feeling of supporting true decentralization, what is the incentive that these people are getting for mining, apart from being able to send their own transaction and mine it through sending the transaction?
Well, the big difference is that your phone isn't mining the whole time. It's not sitting there mining. You just have to mine your transaction. There's a minimum amount of work that you need to do for the network to accept it. So only when you send transactions, do you do a little bit of work, and then we use Clever Maths to squash it all together. So, in effect, this means that there is no reason for me to, become a big player on the network. I'm simply interested in, doing what I need to do to get my transaction on the network. There's no incentive for
centralization. What's your take on the decentralization, the blockchain trilemma, which is basically saying that you can't have all three?
Yeah, well, yes, absolutely. And I did write a sort of little tweet storm the other day about it. And what I would say is that it's not actually a trilemma. It's actually a dilemma, because there's only two things that matter. Because with regard to blockchains, you cannot have centralization, and security. Because as soon as you have lost decentralization, you are no longer secure. Because when we refer to security of a blockchain, what we are actually saying is this blockchain is resistant to censorship attacks. And that can only happen through decentralization. Because as soon as you're centralized, it's easy to censor. It's easy to censor. And so when Vitalik was saying, well, look, you can either have the scalability, the security, or the decentralization, that's wrong. Because you cannot sacrifice the decentralization for security, because those two things are the same. So the only thing that you can actually have is scalability and security stroke decentralization. So I don't think of it as a trilemma. It is a dilemma. Can we scale and can we remain decentralized? That's the goal. We have to come up with technology that remains decentralized, that doesn't have any centralizing forces or pressure on the system, and that can scale to the size that is required for us to do what it is.
So basically, in a nutshell, what Minima is, it will be, as I understood it right now, as we've read it before, we're going to have a completely decentralized blockchain. Like every user will be able to validate transactions on their phone, also on the PC if you'd like, and the value will come from true decentralization. So Minima is going to act like a base layer. Are we allowed to call it Web3? Because a lot of basically decentralized applications will be built on there. Am I right here?
You can call it that. And I'll tell you something else as well. If you really want to do NFTs properly, you can only do NFTs properly with a completely decentralized blockchain. So actually none of the NFT offerings, none, not one single NFT offering at the moment is actually the potential of NFTs. Sorry, Ethereum. But so you not only could you call this Web3, but that's a bit of a kind of maybe a buzzword. What it is a decentralized web. It's a decentralized network. There's even companies saying that they're building Web 4, of course. So I think if and maybe even someone who says they're Web 5, we don't really concentrate on the wordings like that. But ultimately, the key point here is that decentralized equals freedom. And decentralization equals censorship resistance. Decentralization equals independence. Decentralization equals liberation. And that enables people to fulfill their own potential. And if you have a society of people fulfilling their own potential, then you have a very different world that we live in. And whether that's seen as something that's valuable to tens of millions of people, we'll wait and see. It's sure as hell valuable to every single person I've met in the blockchain space in the last 20 years, largely because that's why we built what we built. That's why Bitcoin became Bitcoin. You know, in the B Money paper of 1999, when I was in the crypto groups in 93, 94, 95, cryptography groups, but 10 years earlier, 12 years earlier, I was in the Well. And the Well was around 10 years before the World Wide Web, and that was in the internet. And even then we were discussing how we could re-architect society's constructs of capitalism in a way that would be more free and fair and equitable, more equality. And so, yeah, that's what we're chasing down, and we won't stop.
Awesome. And you've told us you want about 1 million validators, 1 million users on your blockchain by the new year, by Christmas, as we may say it. So.
No, not a million by Christmas. That would be amazing.
That will be amazing indeed.
More like, I think our mainnet is going to be somewhere in Q2 next year, the second quarter of next year. And we would like to have 1 million nodes when we go to mainnet. And the reason we'd like 1 million nodes is because that's then what we think could be classed as secure. And then we will face a mirror to the entire blockchain space and say, if we all agree that 1 million nodes that's where you start kind of talking about security and scalability and decentralization, we've solved the blockchain trilemma for sure. And so now let's look at the other blockchains and say, well, how can they maybe use Minima to realize their potential? Maybe, in fact, you'll find that a lot of DeFi altcoins are created as projects inside Maxima. That would make sense.
Yeah, definitely.
So NFTs have been quite a big topic recently, and I think a lot of people are waking up to the fact that you don't necessarily store the image in your NFT. It's just a link to the image. And if that is stored in IPFS, we've seen that even artworks from Steve Aoki weren't available at times. How's that going to work on Minima?
Yes. So again, NFTs, what a fantastic space that is. As always, these things from a permissionless environment that the crypto scene is. Yeah, this is what we can take our hats off to Ethereum for basically bootstrapping all of this. It's raw at the moment. It's rough at the moment. It's in its infancy at the moment. And the current crop of NFTs and the way that it's done is frankly wrong. And so these unauthenticated JSON blobs that you store in a token and send to each other, interesting and exciting, and the monkeys and the little punk things that it's great to see. I think these are the V1s, and we really need to get to V2 NFT for serious artists to put their work up. And for what I'm talking about here is provenance. What I'm talking about is ownership. What I'm talking about is being able to prove cryptographically the ownership of these tokens and what they represent. And that currently isn't really how the NFTs work. So Minima has an NFT solution, being played with in the R&D, and these are the questions that we ask ourselves. So you need to sign something. There needs to be a signature in there of a token ID which is globally unique, so you cannot make a bit perfect replica of an NFT, which you can now do using net replicas, for any NFT on Ethereum. But that's because they're the V1s. I'm sure there will be different schemes and different protocols that run the NFTs which will fix these initial little issues. But what I really love about NFTs is that they've just sort of come from nowhere, that nobody would have even thought about them, nobody even knows what they were, and then from nowhere they sort of emerged as this force that is taking the internet by storm. So they're a wonderful piece of technology in its infancy, with lots of problems at the moment, which I'm sure will be ironed out in the future, and Minima is trying to address those with strong cryptography and the benefit of hindsight as to what
the real reason for a blockchain is to be able to verify transactions online in a distributed way, not relying on any third parties. The ability to run a full blockchain on mobile means that every person on the network is an equal contributor to the network. So it means that it's far more distributed than it would be with current centralized blockchain solutions.
Ultimately, we believe that the best outcome for society is by the empowerment of individual people to achieve their full potential. And empowering people to be in charge of their own experiences, their own information, their own communications, their own transactions, rather than being part of a large machine that controls what you can do and what you can say. But it requires a network of connected people that is scalable and secure, so that people can safely share and interact and communicate. But that can only come from having multitudes of people part of the network.
We've all got to run this piece of software. And the truth is, we've all got to run the same software in the same way with the same settings. So as soon as you start to think like that, certain things become apparent. And in fact, the only device that I can expect people to have is a mobile phone, which means that if you're going to write a cryptocurrency that is truly global, that is truly enabling and empowering every single user to be an equal member of the network, it has to be mobile native. So Minima from the ground up has been written to run in full on a mobile phone.
I mean, in many ways, the only reason you should have a blockchain is for its decentralization. Otherwise, you might as well be using a SQL database with a centralized server. The whole reason for a blockchain is to be able to distribute the verification and the processing of transactions.
This is different to a wallet. This is different to the current applications that you have out there that are effectively windows into the huge system of computers that are running up in the cloud. This is not that. You're actually running the complete, total, final version of the protocol on your phone. Instead of having a 500 gigabyte database that everybody has to store, with all the information, which is important. You need to have all the data so that you can check all the data, so you can do all the clever things that we do when we're on the blockchain. Why don't we flip this on its head and say, well, the truth is, why can't you just look after the data that matters to you, and why can't I look after the data that matters to me? This is known as a proof database.
And it's a bit like having a book where you have your own page, but you also have a copy of the spine, and everyone else has their own page and a copy of the spine. That's a new version of proof of work.
Every user is an equal on the network. Every user will have the same power as everyone else on the network. So every user will be able to verify and help construct the chain of the blockchain itself, which means that everyone, even just with a small device like a mobile phone, will have equal access.
Minima takes up the space of a standard messaging app on your phone. And so what we're enthused about is that moving forward, as mobile technology becomes increasingly sustainable in terms of how they are powered, that means that essentially Minima will follow that direction. And so rather than having, for instance, in Bitcoin's case, 10% using 10% of the world's power, we see Minima being 1,000,000 times bigger than Bitcoin and 1/10 of its energy drain.
Every user mines their transaction on Minima. You're not actually looking for blocks. There's no financial reward for you to find a block. The users mine their transaction, which is provable objectively to the rest of the network. This is how we accept your transaction. Your work is actually the price you pay to use the network.
The gap that we think should be closed, and we will be closing by Minima, is the gap between what people have and what people need. We believe that everyone should control the tools in this network. We believe that any developer should be able to build on top of it using our layer 2 protocol called Maxima. And we believe that the usage of the tools should be in each individual's control. Ultimately, mobile phones are the most personal device. It's the remote control to your life. Why would you not want to use that remote control to empower yourself and all of the people that you care about?
Our first benchmark is 1 million users on the network.
And the reason why that number makes sense is because when it gets into the high hundreds of thousands of nodes, individual nodes run by individual people, the coercion required to gain control of that network is unfathomable. The largest network at the moment, I think, is Horizon with 40,000 nodes. Bitcoin and Ethereum have 12,000, The rest of the cryptos have sometimes 3. We think 1 million is the starting point.
Have you ever wondered what humanity's final form is? The only thing that I'm 100% certain about is that it must start with freedom.
When I look 5 or 10 years down the line, I see 2 versions of the web. The centralized web that we commonly use, which is brilliant and has changed the world, and the Minima version of how decentralization really can truly work. When that level of collaboration and power comes, then you have a free web and you have the web that we know today. And that's what we're creating here. You know what we were waiting for? We were waiting for the chipset technology to get as good as it is. We were waiting for the mobile technology to be that powerful and that ubiquitous. Now it is. Now we can be free.
First thing I was going to say is that we have removed the developers as well, because the Minima protocol is finished. Yeah, we're not having stages and ice ages, and we're not saying, right, this is now, but in 6 months we're hard forking this, and then in another 6 months we're doing this. No, yeah. If you want to be a global spanning protocol, you have to be finished. It's that simple. Yeah, this notion that you can continually upgrade these decentralized protocols is wrong. Centralized protocols, absolutely. Yeah, you can keep upgrading them because everybody's using you and you're in charge of the mechanism, so you can do that. But a decentralized protocol, yeah, requires it to be finished so that everybody can get on board and say, so this is the protocol, yeah, and you're not going to be changing it. It's like, no, this is off you go. And
these are the rules of the game. You play the game.
These are the rules of the game. This is how it works. Off you go. And like, for instance, top 3, yeah, email. Email hasn't changed for 50 years, 40 years now. Yeah, we've been using email. Gmail. If I want to log into my Gmail account using my email client, I use POP3. Now, don't tell me that we haven't come up with a better method for doing email than the POP3 system. But because it's finished, yeah, because it's a protocol that everybody understands, we can work with it. Yeah, we can use that protocol and we layer on top of it. That's how decentralized systems work. You know, that's how the internet works. You know, the internet is basically based on UDP. Yeah, UDP, the smallest unit that occurs on the internet. And that hasn't changed since they started the internet. And then on top of that, they did TCP/IP, and then they did HTTP, and then guess what? They did the www. Yeah, and all of that is based on technology that hasn't changed in 50 years. And this, as humans, this is what we do. When there is a technology that works, that we can use, that no one else is in charge of, that we can all participate in, we gravitate to it.
That's literally inventing the wheel.
Yeah, well, you don't have to reinvent it. Like, okay, everybody's using it now. Obviously,
Right.
I have to come up with an internet from scratch today. Can I come up with a better method? Maybe. Can I get everybody to use it? No way. You can forget about it. It's just not going to shift. So much is built on top. You know, we call this the ossification of the network.
Are there any strong partnerships Minima has established as a project right now, maybe with other crypto or, just in terms of partnerships? Is there something important to tell about here?
So again, there will be announcements about partnerships at some stage soon, but the key point is and I'm going to answer this question in a way that gives you the answer, but doesn't actually reveal anything that's under confidentiality. If you think about it, because this is a blockchain that runs on mobile phones, one of the most obvious partnerships we would do would be with mobile networks, right?
Right.
So unsurprisingly, that's what we've been doing, and we will over time release information of the networks that we're partnering with, and it's again very telling that it's quite interesting how the networks with the most futuristic vision are seeing this as a way of at worst case replacing their server infrastructure costs because the people are the servers, but at best case can run loyalty schemes and rewards mechanisms through the tokenization on Maxima. Then you have retailers. So we're in conversation with several of the world's largest retailers about how a truly decentralized network could enable their customers to experience their brands in a much more real-time way without using clunky web architecture that has to go through various different Facebook algorithms and Google algorithms to work. And so we've got retailers, mobile networks, then there's entertainment companies. How can a decentralized network with, let's say, 1 million artists using a music platform all run at their own node, and that node and then apps on top of it could essentially be their royalty mechanisms to make sure they get paid when music is played. And then you move into the finance sector. So anyway, I could keep going, but unsurprisingly, the partnership approach is very strong and something that is an extremely high priority for us because we can do so much with the incentive programs and getting people to run the nodes, but this will scale exponentially with 6 or 10 partnerships of networks of 40 to 200 million people.
That's like really something awesome to hear because No, actually, this is really good. The project does work in the back end, and then surprisingly, it turns out that, yeah, here, look, we didn't tell you anything, but we do have the partnerships here and there. We partner with these guys. That's awesome. So basically, what you want to say is that in maybe 1 to 5 years, that's kind of a big range of time, these things may happen, like really can be implemented in the real world. The Minima and some, yeah, awesome.
Absolutely, yeah. But the partnerships that we'll announce before mainnet launch even, the partnerships are crazy scale, and really that's the way to do this. We want to get to billions of users, right? So we're going to launch with 1 million users at mainnet so that we can say that we are now actually truly secure and scaled and decentralized. But there's no way that Minima is going to stop with 1 million users, especially not with the partnerships approach. No way.
That's really great. Well, John, actually, you've told us a lot of info. You made me really happy because it's a lot of interesting things we can share with the audience. I think the audience, the people watching us, as on the English channel, as on the Russian YouTube channel, they will appreciate it as well as I'm appreciating you for taking your time. So thank you so much for coming over. Is there anything you would like to add from yourself, for the people to hear?
Yeah, 2 things. One is practical, and one is kind of theoretical, I guess. So I'll do that in this order. The practical one is the time to get involved in a crypto firm of any kind, or a crypto coin, a crypto offering, a cryptocurrency, distributed ledger technology, whatever you want to call it. The time to get involved is early, early, and Minima is early. We're 9 months away maybe from mainnet or less, but that's so early. And so the people who are involved early win most. And so that's like the practical reality of it all. Goes to incentive.minima.global, join the waiting list early. It will pay you off to do so. That's that point. Secondly, it's more theoretical, esoteric. The question is whether or not you watching this believe that humans have an opportunity to be more free, to be less chained by what we're told we can and cannot do, and to be able to express yourself in the way you want to express yourself and build things in the way you want to build, or partner with people you want to partner with across borders, and using the devices that you have. And if you believe that that's possible, then this is the answer to that belief or that hope. And I know I'm speaking from my heart and Paddy, the creator of Minima's heart, in saying that this is a life's work. From my perspective, 30 years in the discussion of how algorithmic technology can fix society, I'm extremely excited that we're now there. And if anyone else resonates with that, then this is actually your blockchain. It's run by the people.
What would you say is your vision with Minima? What would you think people in 10 years are going to say about us?
Well, no, absolutely. So whereas I can see where every single other chain out there is going, the larger these chains get, the more centralized they get. Yeah, that's just, when Vitalik sits there and says that it's going to take me 85 terabytes a year to run an Ethereum node, I know I'm not going to be able to run a node. And I'm frankly about as hardcore a techie as you get. So 10 years from now, all of these chains are going to be completely centralized with a few runners who actually decide what's going on. And it's not enough to be a validator. This is the crucial point that people seem to be lacking. That validating the transactions is obviously very important because it means that you can't change the rules. But censorship is not a rule change. Excluding a transaction from a block does not break any of the tenets of your blockchain. And the only people who are involved in that are those who are building the blocks. So whereas on these other chains, you've got less and less miners building the chains, less and less pools with more and more hash power, competition, the result is in the title. There's a winner eventually. That's how it's going to go. Whereas on Minima, what we've done is we've switched the competitive element that runs the chain for a cooperative element. And what that means is that we all work together. And so currently, Minima has about 13,000 nodes running. And I'm just going to use the term node as a full node. It's a fully validating, fully constructing node. There's 13,000 people on the network building the blockchain. And the larger Minima gets, the more decentralized it gets. It is the inverse of what we see happening on all the other chains. And frankly, 13,000 nodes, quickly looking, what I would say is that Minima currently, in terms of its decentralization of the consensus that runs the chain, is larger than the sum of maybe the bottom 99% of the chains out there. That's a big claim, but that's currently 13,000 nodes. Clearly, we're probably more than any other chain other than Bitcoin. Yeah. But the point about Minima is not that we are going to be, more than the sum of the Bitcoin nodes. The point about Minima is that we are going to be using more constructive nodes than the sum of every other chain out there. And I'm going to go further and say that not only are we going to be more than the sum of all the other nodes out there, we are going to be orders of magnitude more than the sum of all the other chains out there. yeah, the bigger Minima gets, the more decentralized it gets, the harder it becomes for you to influence which transactions get into blocks, because every single user is out there trying to put transactions into blocks.
Okay,
And so I
so
guess,
sorry,
sorry.
to clarify,
Sorry.
to go back to the question. So let's say in 10 years, so you think we
Yes.
are like at this level of decentralization that basically Minima is the base layer for
Yes.
most of the things.
Yes, sorry. So what I see in 10 years' time, where we have to get to, now Minima has made trade-offs to do what it does. It is not the case that you can just do everything and take all the best bits of, all the other chains and expect people to run this on their phones. No. So, we have had to make trade-offs. The Minima protocol is incredibly lean. It's incredibly, clean. And so what Minima requires is lots of users. Yeah, we are the ones who are protecting the chain. So it requires, frankly, millions of us to do this. And in 10 years' time, for Minima to work, then we need to be using a noticeable percentage of the world's power to protect the chain. Now, let's say Minima gets on every phone on the planet. Okay, that's the start. That's the first course mainly. Yeah. Then we get all the IoT devices, all your fridges, so that your fridge, when it wants to, pay for the food from the supermarket that it gets sent to it, it runs a Minima node. It takes no memory. So why not just whack it in with a chip? And so eventually, 10 years from now, what I hope will happen is that we will have a Minima chip that is installed in every electronic device, which will give you access to the backbone financial network of the planet, and that all of us together will be using somewhere in the region of 0.1% to 1% of the world's power. Because as soon as that happens, every other attack becomes cheaper than attacking the chain, and then Minima works. Then there's no point trying to reverse or reorg a power blockchain by somehow diverting 0.1% of the world's power to some ASIC farm somewhere, which won't exist because there is no capital investment in Minima mining, since there is no return on your capital. So that is never going to happen. So as soon as we become big enough that it just becomes not worth their while attacking the chain, when frankly they can just, not to be violent about this and raw, but that there are other ways of getting people to give you their money without having to reorg a blockchain. They can come up to me and put a gun to my head and say, just give me the money and I'll give it to them.
Yeah, I mean, for the average person, so would you say that maybe people use Minima without realizing in 10 years? Because if it's in my fridge, I don't understand how my smart fridge works.
Absolutely. No one will actually know that they're running on top. They will realize that, people know, hey, we use, the Minima backbone network for our finance. But all the technicalities of it will disappear, just as all the technicalities of using Facebook and all the websites that you're using today have disappeared from the UDP packet protocol that is sending all the messages in TCP/IP and HTTP. You won't know any of those words. Minima will just be seamlessly transparent, running in the background, and everyone will just be using it.
Okay, that sounds like a future to look forward to.
It does.
And one of the buzzwords that gets thrown around quite a lot these days is Web3. And recently, a post by Moxies, the founder of Signal, made the rounds on crypto Twitter. And he was writing about his impressions on Web3. And for those that haven't read it, one of the main points of his argument that we won't get a fully decentralized web ever is that people won't run their own servers. What was your first impression when you read that post, or your first thought?
I thought that everything he wrote applied perfectly to what I see out there in the current sort of Ethereum NFT, current web space. So I can understand why he's saying that, but there is a solution. And the truth is that, phones really have only been around for hard phones, the phones we use today, about 10 years. And my phone now is as powerful as my laptop was, 5 years ago. And they are only getting more and more powerful. So as far as, the future goes, this is our terminus. This is our terminal into the digital space. Your phone is easily capable of doing what a web server was doing 10 years ago. And so as we progress into the future, what we really need is some way of, of information transfer over a phone-based network where users will be running servers on their phones. Yeah, so it is perfectly possible in the future for everybody to be running their own website on their phone, for people to be able to communicate directly. When they invented the internet, they didn't think about encryption and cryptography and security and SSL and all of that stuff. They were all so happy about being able to send hello over the command line to each other, which is where it actually started, that they didn't think, well, they couldn't possibly foresee all the implications of what that information transfer would be. But with the benefit of hindsight, with the benefit of the cryptography that we now have available to us with public and private keys and encryption and decryption and signatures and verification, you can envisage, and I can see a future where we will be able to transact over an information transfer layer in the future, running the services that we require on our phones without anybody being able to interject or stop or censor what it is that we're doing. And going further on this Web3 thing, because it's a very nebulous sort of topic and nobody really knows what it means. They're sort of, what does it mean, this Web3? And I guess
It's
Sorry.
too new for anybody to have a definition yet, and everybody thinks about something else. Some
Yeah.
people might think it's like they're moving around in the 3D world. Some think
Yeah.
it's
What I would say though, at a fundamental level, is it's Bitcoin, yeah, but for information. So what Bitcoin has done is it has shown us that we can have this world where we can be, we can send value in a censorship-resistant way. Mining centralization aside, nobody, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the concepts that Bitcoin has opened the world to. The world is fundamentally different now. People understand that there are, that there are forces out there at play that are incentivized to look after themselves. This is the nature of the beast. This is game theory. There's nothing wrong with that. And that you have to be smart. You have to be clever about this if you want to have a system that is free, a system that enables you to have freedom of value. And so what I think of when I think of Web3 is I take Bitcoin, which is for value, and I want the same thing for information, so that anybody can send any information they want to anybody else in a censorship-resistant way. And once you have that, everything else can be built on top of it. But at the base level, that is what I think of when I see Web3.
Okay, so do you think, basically, I think Moxie is saying that it's just too difficult for people to run a server. So the solution for that is that everybody can easily run a server at the click of a button.
Well, as a minimum proponent, I would say most people would not believe that it is possible to run an entire blockchain on your phone. And yet Minima shows that that is possible. And if you can run a blockchain, I mean, when people think of blockchains, they think 500 gigabytes, they think of massive ASIC web farms, server farms, they think of Ethereum growing at 85 terabytes a year. No wonder he thinks it's not possible for someone to run an HTTP server on their phone. But frankly, that's nothing in comparison to what Minima has to do on your phone to get a blockchain running. So as I said, no, you can't do it in the old way. Yes, we have to be smarter about this, but is it possible? Absolutely. Can I run web servers and Facebook sites and social networks and chat applications, with peer-to-peer between myself and other users? No problem. Absolutely. And we see that playing out in our tech labs because, currently, for those of you that have read the white paper, we have Minima, which is the value transfer layer, but we also have something called Maxima, which is the information transfer layer. And it sort of struck me as, pretty obvious, frankly, when I was writing the Minima paper, that you're going to need value and you're going to need information. Yeah, you need those two things. And if you have a network of censorship-resistant value and information transfer, then you have all the tools required, everything you need to do anything you want. And so we actually have a very beta version of Maxima running between me and all the other techie nerds that I work with, and we will be we will be releasing that for the general public in the coming weeks. And that's really exciting because once you start realizing that you can have the functionality of WhatsApp, but running peer-to-peer over a backbone censorship-resistant network, it sort of gets your heart racing. You sort of realize, God, this is really something different to what I'm used to. It's a very subtle change, but with large ramifications for what will be possible in the future. And I've witnessed it and I've seen it and I know it's possible. And as I've said, don't tell me that an HTTP server is more complicated than a Minima server. And if I can run Minima on your phone, then I can run a web server.
Minima, and there is no mining per se. People just mine whatever transaction they're sending. So that we got this right. And so what do you think happens to the price of the coin at this stage when there are already 1 billion coins distributed and people only run mining through sending?
Well, I'm going to have to say that the price of the coin, I think, is going to be proportional to the amount of users that you have. Yeah, because obviously the more users have something, then the liquidity of the network increases. The more people you can pay, the more functionality you can get out of the network. I mean, price is obviously very important. It's not the most interesting thing. There is no, if something is worth a lot, you just buy less of it. The truth is that in the game of coins that we're all playing, the game of Bitcoin and Ethereum and Minima, this game that we're playing, the prize is so big. Yeah, we're not trying to be like, you don't want your cryptocurrency. You can't even price Apple in Bitcoin. Yes, Apple's worth about 2 trillion. Bitcoin's market cap, the biggest coin out there, is still what, 400 or 500 billion. Yeah, so right. You can't even price Apple in it. And the goal here is not to be, okay, so we need to be worth 2 trillion so you can price Apple. No. The goal of a game of coins is not to be the most valuable company out there. It's not to be worth more than the most valuable company out there. The goal is to be worth the sum of all of the companies out there. You need to be able to price everything. You need to be able to price the whole world in your coin. Yeah, because as I said earlier, there's only going to be one. Yeah, these decentralized technologies, they either work or they don't. Once one of them works, we're all going to pile in. We're all going to start using it. In the next 10 to 15 years, a victor will emerge. We've not found the victor yet. We think it's Bitcoin. Good luck to him. Ethereum thinks it's them. No way. Yeah, I think Minima obviously is the one. But in the next 10 or 15 years, we're going to find out who that is. And you're going to have to be worth the whole planet. Yeah, you're gonna have to be worth everything because you're gonna have to be able to price everything. Yeah, so that's the goal. So at the beginning, $1 billion market cap, $1 trillion market cap, we're gonna hit that soon. Even that is not enough. Even that is not enough to actually work at a global scale. If you want it to be the backbone of the entire financial system for the human race, you need to be worth the human race. We need to be able to price everything and anything in it. The sum of everything needs to be priceable in it.
Right, it has to be the sum of the whole world's
The sum of
value.
the whole, you need to be worth everything, Carlos. It's like, these numbers are so staggeringly massive that at the beginning, a pound, it will minimally worth $1, $1 billion market cap. Okay, that's worth 10 billion. Okay, you're not even worth half, a little bit of Twitter. Yeah, you're worth nothing. You can't price anything. You could run a small little economy on a small island, basically. Yeah. So the truth is that either these things are going to be worth so much money that it's, the volatility, the speed of the rise of the coin is going to be so staggering, or it's not going to work. Currently, I see a lot of coins out there that are speculative. Yeah, you do it just to make money. You jump in, you jump out. You're not actually using it, which is why I love Bitcoin, because you do use it. Yeah, you can pay in Bitcoin. It's a functioning network. You can do stuff.
This is a huge, exactly, it's a huge value proposition. And once you're talking about encompassing the whole world's worth of value,
that's how much we're talking about here, Carlos. It's not going to work unless we're worth that much. And people say, there's going to be multi-chain. There's going to be lots of chains. It's like, that's not how it works. That's not how value works. That's not how humans work. We don't pick, when you look at the world objectively, there's Amazon, there's Google, there's Facebook, there's Netflix. There's always one. Yeah, we always gravitate to one. And with decentralized technology, even more so. There's one internet. And that's the information transfer layer. We need one blockchain, and that is going to be the value transfer layer. Then you're going to have your little offshoot. Fine, they're going to be worth 0.1% of the whole. They're going to be worth 0.01%. But there's no competition here. There is no second internet that I can log into. There is no second email protocol that we use. We all use the same.
There is not even second YouTube or second Facebook. It's just whatever.
Exactly.
YouTube, Facebook.
You see this everywhere and always. Yeah, it's the same. And this is what's going to happen with blockchain. And there needs to be one.
And do you think it can be at some point, let's say, one, instead of just thinking about it as the internet, which is effectively, as you said, just one, do you think the blockchains can end up being something like one global supercomputer that's Ethereum, one store of value that's Bitcoin, and one transaction blockchain that's probably Minima, let's say? Or do you think it would just all flock into one single blockchain?
Either these things work, Carlos, or they don't. Either they scale or they don't. And if they scale, why would you use the second best one? Yeah. So as far as store of value goes, I agree. Yeah, store of value, there's going to be one, because why would you store your value in the second best thing when you could store it in the best thing?
Right.